Hey guys, thanks for watching Dirt Bike Channel. I'm your host Kyle Brotherson, and today we're going to review this KTM 65SX. Stick around.
But yeah, we're out having a good time. Gonna go for a pretty decent ride here. We ride single track, so this is a little different. You can pick your line. Ooh, Kase is showing Konnor a wheel. Kase just passed him.
So thanks for tuning in. This is the KTM 65SX, and these are the two riders that have ridden this bike. These are my test riders. This is my son Kase and Konnor. Kase, how old are you?
9.
Kase is 9 and Konnor, you're 11, right? We don't have the mic on Konnor right now. He's going to take point on the other review we're going to do on the Yamaha YZ65 here in just a few minutes. Who knows which video will get released first. But this is the KTM 65, and this is the bike that you've been riding, Kase, for the last year, right?
Yep.
What's been your favorite thing about riding this bike?
Well, I like how it has a lot of power and it has a lot of low-end torque.
Low-end torque. So what do you mean by that? It had more low-end torque than the other bike you were riding?
Yeah, I feel like the other bike.
What were you riding before?
The KTM
50SX?
yeah, SX. And I feel like the KTM has a little more like low-end torque, and I feel like the Yamaha has more power when you're going more fast.
Okay. Well, let's just focus on the KTM for right now. We'll worry about the Yamaha later. This was your first bike with a clutch. So can you talk to me about how difficult it was? Was it easy? Was it hard learning how to clutch and learning how to shift on this race bike? Because we don't race. We're using this for trail riding and having fun. So what was that like, trying to learn how to use the clutch and shift?
Well, it was kind of hard in the beginning, but after you taught me and I kind of got the hang of it, it was getting easy.
So now, would you want to go back to a bike that doesn't have a clutch, or do you like staying on bikes that have clutches like this?
I would really prefer a bike that has a clutch.
Why?
Because I just like it better, and I like letting out the clutch, and it just makes me feel like more experienced on dirt bikes.
Yeah. So the nice thing about a bike like this is it does have a lot more power than like the little 52 strokes. I think this thing, well, I have taken this bike up many of hills, and this thing will scream and wheelie with me going on the bike. So one of the nice things about having that clutch is it's not robbing the power like you'd have with more of a centripetal clutch or an auto clutch. This thing, it's full on dirt bike. And that's, I guess, my favorite part about these little 65s is this is a real dirt bike. It's got real brakes, it's got real suspension, it's real all the way around, and it's got a ton of power, especially for a little rider like this. These things will absolutely scream when you get them tuned right. So just talking about tuning, the stock carburetor that came on this bike was okay, and we used it for a while. We've had this bike for 2 years, and we used the stock carburetor for about 1.5 years of those 2 years. And I would lean it out here and richen it here, and it worked okay. But eventually we decided to just tune this with Electron. We installed Electron on this bike because we were doing some really high elevation stuff up around 10,000 feet. And we finally fouled a spark plug. We rode the bike for about 50 hours, and then we fouled a spark plug, and I had to push it back to camp one day. And we were just lucky that we weren't too far away. But if these things are tuned properly and you're not throwing too much fuel at it, they don't foul plugs that often. Although it is something that you have to worry about, because sometimes the kids are not up high in the RPMs. And if you're throwing a lot of fuel at that spark plug and the kids aren't blowing it out, wrapping it out, you can foul a spark plug like this. This little bike has a PDS style suspension in the rear, so the shock hooks on the top of the swing arm. It's got hydraulic rear brake, hydraulic front brake, hydraulic clutch. It's hydro all the way around. These bikes are super nice. It comes with it's a formula front brake, formula rear brake, and then a formula clutch. Now, Kase, did you ever have problems pulling the clutch? Was it too stiff sometimes? Was it hard to reach? Talk to me about were you able to reach the controls?
Well, when we first got it, it was really easy, but then as we went through, it kind of got harder, it seemed like.
And then last week, I did some maintenance on it, right? And I actually just took the lever off and greased it. Was it way better after that?
Well, it was a little bit better, but it wasn't too much better.
Okay. So he's saying that it has gotten a little harder over time. I don't think it has. I can feel that, and I say it's still pretty buttery smooth. But if you're thinking about getting this bike maybe over like a Yamaha or something, just because it has hydraulic clutch, that's something that I felt like was a big deal. But the clutch, which is a steel braided clutch, which we have on the Yamaha, is actually just as easy, if not a little easier to pull than the KTM. So the KTM has nice components on it as far as the clutch goes, but that's not a big reason to buy it over maybe like a YZ, because this clutch is maybe a little harder to pull than the YZ, and it might be because of the springs that we have in here. After we installed the Electron on the bike screened. They don't come with a force approved spark arrestor, so we added that on this bike, mainly because we torched the old one. We had it clear full of oil, and so it needed to be repacked, and I thought, you know what, it's time for me to go ahead and get a different silencer, and we'll go Forest Service approved. Now, Kase, have you ever burnt yourself on the pipe, or have you ever hit the pipe when you were riding through things?
Well, when we were at home and we just got out of the dirt bike ride, I burnt my hand on the pipe when I was just taking off my gloves. And
but not a big issue. How long of rides have we been going on? Do you feel like you run out of energy before you run out of gas?
No.
No? Because I feel like the tanks on these, I'm not exactly sure how big they are. I haven't looked it up. But these tanks are actually quite a bit bigger than the little 65cc bikes that we had. And you can go on a pretty good ride with this. It still would be better if Dad was riding a two-stroke and he could, or at least bring a little gas in a little pack if you're going for a long ride. But these things will carry a long way. It's got an air fork on the front, and we don't do a ton as far as changing pressure on the forks. I check them every so often. I don't check them as much as I do on my bike. As far as the tires go, I believe they came with Maxxis tires. We've gone through and replaced the tires on this bike, I think really only once. It's got about 61 hours on this thing. And yeah, so we've replaced tires once or twice and done some things that way. Another thing to mention is the top end on this bike. So if you were racing this bike in a racing situation or something, you might replace the top end fairly frequently. Here we have over 60 hours on the bike, and it still runs really, really good. I've kept a couple of, I'm probably on my second or third spark plug on this thing, but I feel like the bike still has a ton of power. It can be hard, it generally is pretty easy to start unless you flood it. And so what I've found with Electron on this thing is we'll put on our choke, and if you choke it, and then kick it over without giving any gas, the thing seems to be pretty easy to start. If you start giving a lot of gas when you're trying to start it and it's cold, it's easy to flood the bike, and it's hard for the kids to get it to start. So that's just something to note. As far as maintenance, the basic maintenance stuff is pretty straightforward on this bike. I do like how it's easy to get the seat off and get into the air filter. It has a really easy way to change the air filter. I prefer the air filter changing on this bike as opposed to like the Yamaha YZ65. But there's not a lot of room under here to start working on things, especially when we went to put the Electron carburetor on this bike. It was much harder to install on this bike than the Yamaha YZ65. So it hasn't been my favorite bike to work on, but luckily we haven't had to do a lot of maintenance to this. Gear oil changes are really straightforward, very easy. I wish I could find a skid plate for it, and I wish I could find a kickstand for it. We don't have either of those things, and that's kind of a downer. There may be a company out there that makes that stuff, but I haven't been able to find it in my little bit of searching, and so we've gone without it, and that's been kind of a bummer. As far as the power on this bike, Kase, do you think it has more low-end power or more top-end power, or is it pretty even across the entire RPM curve?
I would say it's pretty even. It's pretty even across the thing, and I like its power.
Yeah, I think this bike probably has more low-end power than, say, a Yamaha YZ65 that I have just sitting out of the frame. And I think the top end on this is maybe a little bit softer than the Yamaha, but overall, I think if you're a slower rider and you're a little bit more timid, this bike is going to be maybe better for you because it has that low end power. One of the reasons why Kase has ridden this bike more recently than his older brother is Kase is shorter, and this bike sits lower to the ground, and it's narrower than a YZ65, which makes it seem about 2 inches shorter than the YZ65, even though it's really only about 1 inch shorter as far as the seat height. The way that the ergos happen and everything happens here, this bike is almost 2-3 inches shorter, the way it feels and the way it's set up than something like a YZ65. So it's been very good. Kase has been able to switch back and forth, but I do think this is serves you better in the low RPMs than maybe a YZ65. Ultimately, this has been a really fun bike for me to watch the boys grow on. They've both ridden it a lot. Konnor didn't get to talk a lot on this one. He's going to talk on the next one. But Konnor, give me a thumbs up if you think this is a fantastic bike.
I think it's a pretty good bike.
You think it's pretty good? Yeah. I think it's a fantastic bike. I'm so happy that we're on these. Real soon, one of these kids is going to be moving up to an 85. This thing gets 2 thumbs up from me. They scream. They have a ton of power. It is the first real dirt bike for these kids. There's other options out there that you could do, but I wanted to get them into more aggressive trail riding, and that's what this bike allows them to do, is to be more aggressive and to push a little harder, a little faster, have fantastic brakes, front and rear, and then start learning how to shift and learning how to clutch. 6-speed clutch bike right here, you know, 1 down, 5 up, and these little things will rip and they will scream. So anyway, that's what we've got. Do you have any closing thoughts on it, Kase?
That I think is a really good bike. Probably the best bike I've had.
I would totally agree, and it's been pretty good to us, especially since we put the Electron carburetor on there, and then we don't have to worry about tuning the bike anymore. So, hey, if you like these videos, please give us a thumbs up. Give a thumbs up for these 2 boys that came out here and helped me with the review. They are my buddies, and they are my adventurers that I'm going to have with me for the next long time, many decades to come. And if you want to support our family, this is how we support our family now. So you can make purchases, or I mean, you can support me by going to dirtbikechannel.com. Every once in a while, I have dirt bike sweepstakes going on where you can buy gear and win dirt bikes. You can support us on Patreon. You can even set up like a monthly tip amount just through Amazon, or not Amazon, PayPal on my website. I have links for Amazon and other things. So thank you so much for watching these videos, and remember to leave a single track. Thanks, guys.